Duchovy, and welcome to this very special. Nope, we just did this time capsule episode of the Say Report. This is your host, Sejan Sarowick, and I'm here with my host companion, Devin Decker.
Great Kuga Muga! I'm Devin Decker.
And I gotta say, they told me that Busted made them feel good, so I guess everybody wanted to get in on the game, Dev. Because today we are talking about a spiritual successor to the Ghostbuster franchise, which is very heavily within the DNA of this show, the Ghostbusters, I mean. So it was actually it was a weird moment when I realized we had not talked about this film yet, and so we are now dedicating an entire special episode. Oh, nope, did it again. An entire time capsule episode to this. This is only because you told me to not call it that I can't stop calling it now.
It can't stop or won't stop. No, I mean, I understand that. I knew that I got you all in your head, and I apologize for that. But I actually think it was a bit of, I'm trying to think of that word. It's the opposite of evolution, where people, it's like design, grand design, divine design. I think that's what interceded to the fact that we didn't do an evolution episode up to this point. Because what better way to look at evolution than 20 years later? And this time capsule episode beautifully becomes a 20-year glance back, since this film came out in 2001.
Yep. Yeah, man. So we are talking about, have we said the movie yet? We've
said Evolution a bunch of times.
Evolution.
Directed by Ivan Reitman. Yeah, which, we talk about there's DNA of Ghostbusters. He is the director of Ghostbusters.
Yes. So a couple of things on that, though. So first of all, I will say that personally, it never really clicked for me. Like, I always felt that there was a very Ghostbusters vibe to this movie, but it didn't even click in my head that it was Ivan Reitman and it was Ghostbusters and all this stuff. That being said, looking back on a lot of the criticism of this movie at the time, it was heavily compared to Ghostbusters in a lot of different critical areas, to the point where I almost have to feel like it must have been promoted this way, right? Because there is a now that I am aware that this is a thing that Ivan Reitman directed this film, and that there's a lot of the DNA of the Ghostbusters-esque story in this. It was really hard this time to not see that, like, as I was watching this movie. And again, going back and reading some of the criticism of the film at the time, it was pretty on everybody's mind. It was a pretty big deal that this was like going to be as I said, spiritual successor to that concept of the Ghostbusters. And the fact that it couldn't quite live up to that is, I think, what kind of made it sit in such a mediocre middle ground of a sci-fi comedy.
So, yes, I understood. I offered my parents to watch this film with me when I said, I'm going to watch Evolution. Do you guys want to get in on that? And the direct quote from my father was, well, that movie is awful. It had that David guy from the X Show. And I go, yup. And he goes, we saw it at a drive-in. And I go, yeah, I was there. Like, it's not like I'm watching Evolution for the first time. And then my mother chimes in, I don't remember a freaking thing about that film. So that's where my parents were at. Now, I have to tell you, 2001, I can't drive, right? Mm-hmm. 2001 right. David Decker is too young to have a license or a car. So if we saw it in a drive-in, that's because mom and dad were interested. And I can think the only reason that mom and dad would be interested is because of the Ghostbusteriness about this particular film.
Yeah. I like I said, I now that I know what it is, like, that's how this movie got made, right? That is really kind of the hook of this entire film, is like the guy that made Ghostbusters is at it again, only this time it's with aliens. Like, is really kind of the elevator pitch for this movie.
I mean,
really.
The trailers for this film didn't even touch on the alien aspect of it. It was just evolution with the smiley face with three eyes and an Ivan Reitman film. That is all the trailers sort of leaked out. And you have to imagine that is because, from a marketing standpoint, We want people to think that this is Ghostbusters 2000, and the second we do anything else about this movie to reveal what it's about, we will be in trouble. It's already probably not playing in Pretoria because it's called Evolution.
Yeah.
So,
oh man,
what are you going to do? I have leaned on that Pretoria phrase a lot. Hopefully it has been some time before we release this time capsule episode. And the truth about Evolution is, it is a perfectly fine and enjoyable film as long as you don't compare it to Ghostbusters.
Yeah,
as we now proceed to
agree.
compare it to Ghostbusters.
Well, but that's what I mean, right? Is like this is the shadow that is cast over this entire film. Is this idea that at the time and upon now rewatching, like it's kind of hard to not see that it's an attempt at trying to get lightning to strike like they did with Ghostbusters, you know, and like there's hard to ignore elements that are just brought forward into this film. And in fact, there's even a bit of evolution of the Ghostbusters formula into this movie. Like, I only say that as half a joke because it's true. There's definitely some stuff that Ghostbusters, especially in the late 90s, was facing a wee bit of criticism. We were starting the veneer was starting to rub off on that film for the people that that loved it at that time. Things like Ernie Hudson's character like showing up 40 minutes into that movie and like having no lines for the rest of it, and that being the only representation in that film was definitely something that was brought up more than once at the end of the 90s. And so like it feels like in order to correct that ship, you have Orlando Jones in this one in one of the lead roles, but then still having that character in Seann Williams Scott being present. It was a really interesting move. I'm
really glad that we both made that exact comparison where I wrote down Harry Block equal Venkman ? And then Wayne Gray equal Winston.
Yes, he is definitely Winston, and you know, but then on top of that, giving him more importance in the story writ large because he's also there every time something happens at the beginning, right? Like we'll talk more about that, but yeah, it's
the exact line I wrote down is, imagine if the librarian from Ghostbusters eventually became a Ghostbuster.
Oh man, yeah, the look of the Ghostbuster follow-up is hard to shake, and it's unfortunate because I think you're right. I think that if you divorce it from that, it suddenly becomes a much more palatable film. The problem is that when you're watching it with that in mind, it becomes really hard to enjoy some of the new stuff that's being brought into this movie. But yeah, Evolution, man, 2001. I saw this movie maybe 3-4 times in theaters because specifically at the cheap theater because it was that perfect time for us where me and my friends would meet up and go to United Skates and then pop over to the cheap theater and watch a movie. And we loved this one. Like, it was weird and scary, and I was a huge David Duchovny fan at the time. Orlando Jones was one of those actors that, comedians specifically, that we all knew, we all watch Mad TV, and he has at this point some small roles in things like Office Space, right? Like he shows up as the magazine salesman, like he's doing those kinds of gigs in movies. Had he done Double Team yet? The one with Eddie Griffin? Isn't that the one that?
Yeah, I feel like that movie comes out around the same time. It's probably a 2001 film, but pre-Evolution. I don't know. The problem is I watched Evolution immediately before we recorded, so the secondary research that I usually do on these films is unfortunately lacking because the cast in this film is incredible. For a 2001 picture, this is an incredible cast. And
but I mean, you get that when Ivan Reitman shows up and says, "I'm making another Ghostbusters." You know what I mean?
Dude, why the fuck is John Cho in this movie? As a background character with zero dialogue, because I want to be into new Ghostbusters.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
You get Ty Burrell in as a weird little side character.
Ty Burrell,
as the antagonist, is really good. Yeah, man.
As nothing, right? Like, this is before Ty Burrell was anybody.
Mm-hmm. Oh, so just to give some context with Orlando Jones, the year before this was The Replacements, and the year after this is The Time Machine, where he has the weird role in the Time Machine. But it's that time period for him when he's trying to make a break at it in doing this movie thing. And I mean, like, this is a hell of a score. Again, to be when Ivan Reitman shows up and says I'm doing a Ghostbusters style project, you get to be one of the leads in it is like hell's yes. Like, um,
and make
so
Seven Up yours. We can't
well,
ignore the make Seven Up yours of it all
I
because
know.
no
I
one
said that.
did. Even the
I said
film
that.
doesn't.
I said that to somebody last night. I was like, "Yeah, with the big Seven Up Yours guy," and they just didn't know what I was talking about. And I was like, "Is this it? Is this like is this the cutoff between me and you? Because they are like 4 years younger than me." I was like, "Did this? You
Oh my
don't know
god.
this Make Up Yours campaign?" Um,
Is make Seven Up yours the new OPP divide?
possibly. Oh man. So, so this movie is somewhat successful at the time, not hugely successful. Again, does like pretty mediocrely well when it comes to criticism, but it does do enough to merit then a cartoon show
Oh
for
my
a season that I
I wish
remember.
the cartoon show were somewhere.
It
The
it had been up on Prime like 4 or 5 years ago, back when Prime was like the cesspool of forgotten television, and like I miss those days. But they've cleaned up their act in the last few days, in the last few years, and they've really dropped a lot of those nonsense like one season shows that they had. So it kind of got lost in that cull.
That's a shame because that is after watching this film again, I immediately want to rush to the television show because as much as this is Ghostbusters 2000, and I want that to be the last time that I say it, but
Hmm.
it's hard not to, and it will come up again. But I want to stop that comparison directly. It is so much trying to follow in the exact vein of Ghostbusters with okay, so it was mildly successful because Ghostbusters, as much as it is a cultural phenomenon, mildly successful at the time. I mean, it made a bunch of money and it's the second best performing film of 1984, but it wasn't a global phenomenon until the Real Ghostbusters TV show happened. And
For
it
sure.
was the Real Ghostbusters TV show that led to them making the second movie.
Right.
And that's why it was sort of infantilized in the second film. And they become, we're appearing at children's birthday parties because they tried to be meta with how this film appeals to children because of the show.
Hmm.
And it takes this weird, it's a weird trajectory. And it feels like, so Evolution did fine. As a 2001 movie, it did fine. But let's see if we can get that longevity and prove how beloved it is in order to make Evolution 2.
Yeah, right. We won't get an Evolution 2 unless we can really make this into a thing. Like we got to get toys in people's hands. And yeah, man, it's it's really weird going back and watching this movie with all of this realization that like at the time I just it's not even that I didn't know it, is that it didn't matter to me in watching this film, right? Like we talk all the time about the context in which we take in films, and this is just early enough in my life that like I didn't consider this sort of stuff when I went to a movie. I either liked it or I didn't like it based on the merits of its own, because I just wasn't thinking that deeply about this stuff. I'm not kidding. Like at the time, like me and all of the boys would like we'd quote this film, like we'd do like the Seann Williams Scott bits, like caw 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 dookie dookie, like we'd yell that shit to each other in like gym class and stuff. Like it became that kind of movie. So they got close, like they got real close to really turning this into that thing that they wanted it to be. And I just there's a lot that kind of gets in the way. It's also hard to ignore that I believe this movie came out in early 2001, but at least by August 2001. Let me get that date because that matters because
It
that
is
like
pre September 9th,
yeah,
September 11th,
yeah, it is a
20,
month. Yeah, it
2001.
is a month before like September 11th happens, and guess what we stopped doing for almost immediately is like paying attention to shit like this. Like it kind of really does get kicked in the pants by the world basically changing overnight, right? Um, yeah, but the other thing is it's hard to not think about this movie in comparison to Ghostbusters 2016, because a lot of the reaction that goes on to Ghostbusters 2016 it's like people forgot about Evolution, like because people were just like, "Oh man, I wish they would just make a Ghostbusters the way I want them to make a Ghostbusters." And I have to be like, they tried that like 15 years ago, and nobody fucking went like it didn't light the world on fire. So like what you're asking for was actually already attempted by the director of Ghostbusters, and it didn't work. So this mythical idea in your head of Ivan Reitman coming in and making a good Ghostbusters third movie, like we've actually already shown that might not necessarily work. Like,
yeah, and that's the biggest thing. I mean, I was going to talk to you about this off mic, but now that you've brought it up, I'd kind of like to time capsule Ghostbusters Answer the Call after watching Evolution. It's been 5 years, which, how does that put that into perspective for you, that we are 5 years removed from Ghostbusters Answer the Call as we look at Evolution 20 years later?
I believe coming up, like, didn't it come out for the Valentine's weekend? I might be misremembering that.
No, it came out in the heat of summer. It came out in July. It was supposed to be a summer blockbuster, and it was very strange. And the opening weekend for Ghostbusters Answer the Call, which we need to focus on Evolution. Like, I'm gonna put a call off on Ghostbusters comparisons at the 20-minute mark of this episode. So if you can get them all into order for the next 4 minutes, I think that's probably... I want to pay tribute to this film, because this film deserves it. And it's unfortunate that you can't discuss it without talking about Ghostbusters, but we need to damn well try, Sejan. But Ghostbusters Answer the Call comes out, and it has such a crazy opening weekend that Sony greenlights a sequel. And then the next weekend, the drop-off is so severe that they immediately cancel that sequel.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, and I was having conversations with people up to a year later about, no, there's a sequel coming, and having to be like, no, I know that you heard that a sequel was coming because that was the one that was broadcast everywhere. But then when the second weekend was nowhere near the first weekend, they reassessed that. And it's disappointing, because I was excited to see where the Answer the Call universe of Ghostbusters could go.
Yeah, I mean, but this movie never gets that kind of treatment. It kind of just flounders.
No, it dies on the line, and it's
we will
sad.
see. We will see how much we could talk about this movie and not talk about it in Ghostbusters terms, because, I'd give you because like I'll give you a breakdown of the plot of this film, but it's basically just Ghostbusters.
I think it's
two
more
scientists working. Go for it.
I think it's more cerebral than Ghostbusters. That would be my very first critique of this film, is that this film is if Ghostbusters really took the time to look into the science instead of the hilarity of ghosts in New York and these guys becoming ghost exterminators. You get Evolution, because the biggest difference between Evolution and Ghostbusters, and when I say let's not talk about Ghostbusters, I mean let's not talk about actual facts and figures about Ghostbusters anymore. Let's try to talk just Evolution. I'm sorry for like trying to police you. That wasn't my intention, Sejan. It's just like, because I want to talk about the fact that these four characters feel like analogs for characters in Ghostbusters. I think it's an important place to start with this film. But this film is all build to the climax, and that build is fantastic. I absolutely love it, but it's more thinky. What I want from Evolution is more time in this universe. I want to explore the lore of this world, because I believe that in the Earth of Evolution, humans themselves and every other organism on this planet also came from a meteor striking the Earth's surface.
Oh, I think that's supposed to be the intention, right? Is the idea that this is the spark that sets off life on every planet is a rock falling from space.
Right, and it happened before, and it killed off the indigenous dinosaurs, which may have had an asteroid even before that we don't know of. But then we know about the asteroid that hit for the dinosaurs. And why would we care about that? Why as a society, as a species, would we give a damn about the asteroid that struck this planet that led to human life, unless it was our motherfucking Mayflower, Sejan?
Yeah. And like the fantastical bit is supposedly supposed to be the idea that it's happening overnight, right? Like
Yeah.
the idea that 200 million years of evolution happened in less than 24 hours, I think is the line. And like the idea that this is happening at such an advanced rate that we basically can't stop it. Like we're about to hit a tipping point where we can't come back from stopping this thing from taking over. And that being said, there's a lot of other fantastical moments in this movie as far as science goes. But yes, I think that you're not wrong there. There's whereas where Ghostbusters is the kind of thing where it's the comedy of the situation first, and then they make up science to support it. In this one, it feels very heavily like geared towards the science being the thing that they want us to know, and then like the comedy comes out of that. So like there's a lot of really weird moments where Harry and Kane will just like break off into just nonsense science explanations that now seem like almost cringeworthy in some of the like simplicity and buzzwords that they use that were really popular at the time when talking about evolution, because it was still a time when this was a conversation to be had, right? Like, I mean, even now it still is in some areas, as you joked earlier, but like it was kind of a ballsy move to be putting this movie out in the year 2000, 2001, to say like this is the stance that we are taking, is that basically religion doesn't come up in this movie, which is like wild to me, right?
Is the craziest part about this film.
Yeah.
Like,
And yeah, the way in which it leans so into the science of evolution as we understood it in those times is crazy. I mean, like the one that got me, the moment that really set it off for me, is the fact that the first true like physical evolution that you see of anything that comes out of the thing is flatworms. And like I was literally just like this week reading about like the importance of the flatworm part of like our evolution, because I'm a fucking nerd and was reading about that. But like, to be fair, I was doing it because I was reading about how Spore like fucked up the idea of evolution as a video game. But but anyway, but like but
I like how we
reading
evolved into talking about this film, Sejin. Thanks for that explanation.
it's not a bad it's not a bad point. But the idea that but the idea of that being a huge stepping stone, and like that actually becomes like a definitive moment of this movie's story, is when they realize that they've then all become flatworms. Speaking of John Cho not having any lines, it's that scene. Yeah, and like, so the ways in which it finds the the teachable moments, I guess would be the best way to put it, is really weird and really and definitely a step forward from what happens in Ghostbusters.
Right. I mean, because again, Ghostbusters is faith. Evolution is science.
Mm.
And and there you go with a crazy tagline for what this is all about. Should we discuss the plot of this film? I feel like
Yeah,
it's deserved.
yeah, like I was saying earlier, like we can. It's real easy.
Yeah, go for it. I'd love to hear your plot description of Evolution, Siege.
So scene opens with meteorite falling to Earth, as we've already said, and it hits ground and destroys a poor young man's vehicle. And
He can still drive it, and that's my
yeah,
favorite part about the film. But
and because there is basically nothing in this like 100-mile stretch of Arizona that we are introduced to. The only close like scientists on hand to call are these two lead scientists from the local community college. And what are they? Harry Block and Ira Kane.
Ira Kane, yeah.
Ira Kane. I keep checking back over the cast list of this movie and remembering more people that are in it. Sorry. Yeah, so Harry Block and Ira Kane go to check it out and discover that the meteorite that fell was carrying some form of life, in that they find that it had water within it, and then Ira figures out that within the water there's single-celled organisms to start off with. However, very quickly they begin to realize that the things that were on the meteorite are evolving at a rapid pace, to the point where they begin to see things like flatworms in life within less than 24 hours of this thing landing. Now, it is at this time that that the government then gets involved and takes over the operation of looking over this meteorite that fell to Earth, and they quickly, Ira and Harry, get kicked out of the conversation. And not being happy about that, there's many a comedic attempt at them trying to get back into the conversation, but it eventually leads to them being completely banned from being anywhere near the site, just as they discover the true danger of what has actually become like the big threat of this movie, and that is that eventually these things are going to evolve beyond humanity and be unstoppable. And it is at that point that they realize that they need to no longer be like scientists studying this thing, but actual straight up alien exterminators. And from there, it leads to the big climax of this film, in which we get the biggest sphincter puppet I've ever seen on screen, and we lose Orlando Jones to it for about 2-3 minutes too long, as far as I'm concerned. But they do discover a way to destroy the aliens with the help of, it's not Wayne Gretzky, what's his name? Wayne
Gray.
Wayne Gray, thank you, or Wayne Green. Wayne Green which is what I kept calling him, because apparently that was his name in the show.
His name was different in the show.
Yes, his name was different in the show, and that's why every time they kept calling him Wayne Gray, I was like, that's not his name though, right? And I had to look it up, and I was finally like, oh, that's why I think it's something else. So Wayne Green, local volunteer firefighter. Allison, who's never given a last name,
Reed.
As far as I can
She's
tell.
Dr. Reed.
Dr.
Allison Reed.
Okay, because
epidemiologist.
Who works for the CDC, which
we're gonna touch on it,
Julianne Moore was in this movie was weird, and also randomly 2 side characters from the first 5 minutes of this film suddenly become part of the team for the last 20 minutes. In 2 of Ira's students, played by Michael Bauer and Ian Supley. who just become like the weird kind of like Rosencrantz and Guildenstern of this film.
So it's Ethan Supley. I just want to, because you said Ian, it's Ethan.
Oh.
But that makes sense. You're still thrown off by the Evolution cartoon series, where I believe his name was Ian. No, yeah, they come in, and honestly, I feel like there's a 4-hour cut of Evolution somewhere. I feel like, because all of these characters are introduced, and then they come back and they have meaning later. Another character that's important to that is the female student that Harry is talking about. You know, we need to coach your grades up if you're going to become a nurse. And he's like, but do you really want to have a job where people's lives are in your hands? And her response is, no, I kind of want to be Miss Arizona. And my pageant coach says that this will look good on my resume for that.
Right.
And she, at the very end of the film, after disappearing, where she's sort of a lead up to the point that Julianne Moore is introduced, you see her at the end, and she has the Miss Arizona sash on. So she has achieved her goal. And it's just like, I bet that there is a storyline out there where we see that kind of happening against the backdrop of the evolutionary threat from space.
Yeah.
And it almost feels so weird that Drew and I can't think of the other character name, they're the Donalds. Deke and Drew, the
right.
Donalds, they are, it's weirdly, they're a big focal point of the beginning of the film, so it doesn't feel strange. Mm-hmm. Oh, it's Deke and Danny. Sorry. It doesn't feel strange that they eventually join up with the team, and you almost feel like these guys were meant to be the comic relief of this comedy film. Yeah. Like, these guys were basically the dick and fart joke duo, and then they didn't need it. Like, as they were working through the movie, they're like, no, like, we should be smarter about this comedy, right? Like, that's what made Ghostbusters work. And we'll get that dick and fart joke stuff at the end with the big sphincter shooting Head and Shoulders up it. And we'll get there with Orlando Jones having a bug crawling around under his skin which is that's a scene that I can't wait to talk about. Um,
Yep.
so this film also feels like it itself evolved away from just being that basic Ghostbustery movie. And honestly, if I had to just figure out why, and fuck me, I'm breaking my own rules here, Sejan, so I do apologize for saying it. I feel like Extreme Ghostbusters is probably a big reason why the team is not a bunch of kids and why we focus on the adults again. And the youngest member of the squad is Wayne.
Yeah, well, and so the question that I had the whole time is, this movie is not directly written by Reitman like the Ghostbusters movies were, right? Like Reitman has so much creative control in the Ghostbusters stuff that it's why that conversation comes up all the time about like the true Reitman Ghostbusters universe and all that nonsense, right?
Yeah.
So is this movie a thing that Reitman comes across the script for and goes, I'm going to take this and turn it into my Ghostbusters style comedy? Or is this like an idea that he had and somebody else just is brought on to write it for him, and so we're seeing like there's definitely new blood in the DNA of the creation of this movie, right? Like there's something more to this than there is to the Ghostbusters, and part of that I think is a reaction to things like the Extreme Ghostbusters, but part of it to me is also because it feels like somebody came and kind of slapped the veneer of Ghostbusters onto a script that already existed. But I don't know, like it's so hard to tell with this movie what came first, right? The the chicken or the egg, right? There's the
meteor or the flatworm. Can you look up the screenwriter of this film? Is that something that you can get? I can vamp and I can cover while you do that.
No, I got so it's Don Jacoby and David Diamond is the one that does the full screenplay. David Diamond also writes Old Dogs, When in Rome. Let's see. Before this, the movie that he had written was The Family Man. Do you remember that? The
Nick Cage movie? That's It's a Wonderful Life?
Yeah, he hasn't done much more than that. Like what I basically said to you is basically his entire writing career.
Okay, so this film definitely feels like it was an existing script that Ivan Reitman got his hands on.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't feel like the creative control. And I'm also going to point out, Ghostbusters was Harold Ramis and Dan Aykroyd. They wrote that. And the reason why Ghostbusters is remembered is because when Ivan Reitman came in to direct it, he's like, no. We're not going to just have them exterminating and ghosts are just a nuisance that already exists. We're going to explore the origins of that.
Right.
Like that's the catalyst that leads to the evolution of Ghostbusters. I hate this. I absolutely hate this.
That we keep avoiding as much evolution terminology as possible.
But it's not avoiding. You have to lean directly into it, right?
Yeah,
I got to lean into the skid. Otherwise, we're going to wreck. But it's so hard not to when you look at this film and just see what it was and what it was meant to be. Sorry. I love it. I do love this movie. But it sucks that you have to discuss it's so closely tied to Ghostbusters because ultimately that is why it fails. Yeah, it fails because of that.
Yeah, because instead of letting it be its own movie, you get direct scenes from Ghostbusters in this movie. I mean, the moments that you were talking about earlier with Orlando Jones and the young female student that has come to him because her grades are weird, almost beat for beat reflects the opening of Ghostbusters, where we watch Bill Murray and the girl taking the test, right?
To see if she has psychic powers.
Yeah, we see dialogue almost straight up lifted from that, right? Or later on when they're eating lunch as they test the liquid that they found is straight up reminds me of the Chinese food scene from Ghostbusters 2 when they're like zapping the goo, right? There's just all of this imagery and there's this oeuvre of over every scene that is just remember when we watched Dan Aykroyd do this before? And then Dan Aykroyd shows up on screen. So like it's been reminding you this whole time, and then it just shoves it down your throat when Dan Aykroyd straight up shows up in this movie.
So I have watched this film at least 5 times in my life, and that is spread out over years.
Yeah.
Because I only saw it once in 2001 in the drive-through, and first of all, we also saw it at the drive-in, not the drive-through. Imagine watching movies at the drive-through. That'd be hard. It'd be hard to get through a film, right? I'm gonna have to order another Big Mac. Yeah. Watching at the drive-in, and it is the drive-in is the worst place to watch a film. I believe that if there's a commandments of the Say report, that probably sneaks in around 7 or 8. Is that if you saw a movie in the drive-in, it was about the experience, not the film.
Yeah.
So seeing Evolution as a drive-in movie, like, I mean, that could have been the other reason why my parents were okay seeing it, is because, well, we get to go to the drive-in. And, Devin's excited about the film because it's Ghostbusters.
Mm-hmm. Right.
That makes perfect sense to me as an explanation. But then, like, you see the movie in the drive-in, like, you don't have the best memories of it. It's another movie that we should explore deeper. But Power Rangers, the movie, right?
Mm-hmm.
Did you see that in theaters?
I did, but I saw that in a real theater, not
no,
but
that's what. Did you see it multiple times?
No, it was early enough in my life where my mom was willing to bring me once, but she definitely got a say in whether or not we ever went back to a movie. That's why I saw Bug's Life like 7 times.
Perfect. No, I just wanted to confirm, because Power Rangers the movie is another one that I definitively remember seeing at a drive-in. And it's one of those ones where I feel like you have fonder memories of that film than I do whenever we have discussions about it. Which is not to say that I don't enjoy Power Rangers the movie, but it's very hard to cast off that initial drive-in experience of it.
No,
it
I got
the
that
film.
Yeah, I got that drive-in taint on Dinosaur, the animated Disney Dinosaur. Like I've only ever seen that movie once in my life, and it was at a drive-in. And it was the early movie, which meant that like the sun was still setting, so we couldn't see the first like 20-30 minutes of that film. I don't remember the back half of that movie. I just do not remember. And I saw it beginning to end because we always stayed for both movies because we would always go to the Rustic, which was always the double feature films, But yeah, man, like that, you're not wrong. Like the drive-in is one of those. We always talk about context when seeing a film, and it's one of those places that really it's like watching a movie on hard mode.
Yeah. It's like watching a movie on Don't Hurt Me, Daddy, or Hurt Me Plenty. Whatever the hardest one. I Am Death Incarnate. That's the hardest mode in Wolfenstein. Yeah, it's awful. It's just the worst way to experience a film. And I don't think that should discount it. Now, every subsequent viewing of Evolution, I'm watching it because, Evolution, that's a movie I saw. And even this, like, it's only been about 2-3 years since I've watched Evolution. And this viewing, again, I was approaching it as Evolution. I wasn't approaching it as a Ghostbusters movie.
Yeah.
And in so doing it, immediately you're taken in by it. The film is gripping. It is compelling. And it understands that right now, freaking audiences love aliens. We've had Independence Day. We've had Men in Black.
Men in Black. I mean, that's the other big influence on the film for sure.
Oh,
and that comes down to what I think Men in Black really brought to the table is that the aliens are allowed to be like goofy. And so like in this movie, like you end up with, first of all, so much good physical work in terms of the like puppetry and stuff like this, and like that's one of the beautiful things that Reitman brings to this project is that there is a lot of CGI in this movie, like more than you would have seen if it had been made 5-6 years earlier, right? But he still has tons of stuff that is physical prop work, like, and so the aliens are all like they've got fun shapes to them, they've got fun colors. When the monkeys come out later on, because eventually they evolve into primates, they're blue, right? Like they're like this beautiful like blue fur color that comes out. So there's an ugliness to everything that's going on with the aliens, but it has got this really fantastic cartooniness to it, much in the same way that like in Ghostbusters you look at like something like Slimer, right, or the way that the proton packs behave with like the hand drawn animation over the cell for the proton pack beams, and like that, like you get that same attitude in Evolution with the alien work in this.
Yeah, first of all, the aesthetic of the aliens, so that they all look like they come from the same base species, is gorgeous. Like whoever designed every alien in this film, it like deserves a round of applause. And it's a shame that they probably didn't get it because this movie wasn't Ghostbusters. And that's disappointing. But I also think of the little green guy that's in the suburban house. That why did we think aliens were dogs in the early 2000s?
Every time something is ugly and on four legs, somebody thinks it must be a dog, and I don't know why that joke is still like why it's not even a joke; it's a trope at this point.
Yeah, it's a trope, and I don't get it. It must be a dog. No, there's no way that this slug thing is a dog, you idiot.
Yeah, but don't go anywhere near that.
Yeah, but then when the chicken head comes out, like that's so reminiscent of the real Ghostbuster toy line, specifically the toy line. I don't think they ever were released of the cute creatures line, where they would look cute and then you'd press a button and they'd be all freaky. And it's like that's. I mean,
you could see you could see the McDonald's toy in the making when that was when that shows up on screen, right?
And then that little doofball eventually becomes the Slimer, though all yellow and with the face of the Evolution logo in the cartoon show. Like that's the basic design that they leap on. You know, I need to address it here because it's been rattling around in my head. It makes me very happy that his name is different in the cartoon. That it's not Wayne Gray, that it's a different name, because I'd never liked that he became part alien in that series.
Yeah.
Like, it always kind of rubbed me the wrong way.
Yeah, the series gets real weird. The ways in which it writes out Allison, but she is still present is really bizarre. Like, like they break up, and like it's never really addressed, and then like she shows up from time to time.
And that's because boys don't want to buy girl toys. And that's it. It is the most toyetic move in the world to get rid of a female character in a cartoon series. But
to still have another female character that they bring in, they just make her an army person so that way her toy line can have like guns and stuff.
That's crazy. I don't know what to do. I need to watch the series. And that's the thing. I just want to explore Evolution. The film Evolution makes me want to explore the world of Evolution so much deeper than I bet it ever has been. Like, because I want to know if we came from a rock just like this species did. I've already expressed that. But then just the other things that the implications of this meteorite represents is staggering to me.
I mean, like there's so you have to start working backwards, right? And the way that this movie really kind of just like has an inciting incident and then always is looking forwards, and this movie moves. I mean, like the ticking clock of this is Evolution happening on like a super fast scale is actually like a phenomenal like plot device in this movie, because of the idea that we know that these things are evolving as fast as they are. I think this movie only takes place over like 3 days, right? Like it's not long.
There's the craziest thing, because I specifically mention how I love the passage of time in this film.
Yeah.
From the time that Harry and Ira, the military comes and they're shut out of the base, and then we cut to them in military court where they're trying to get access to the site again, 2 weeks have passed.
Oh yeah, that's true. They do mention that.
They mentioned that it's been 2 weeks
ago. Yeah.
And then can you believe that all of this has happened over the course of 3 weeks? Yeah. Which is good. It's smart because it brings in the fact that it does take some time. It makes Julianne Moore's speech about within 2 months the entire United States is extinct. It means that we have a fighting chance. If it took place over the course of 72 hours, you'd be like, this is absurd. The absurdity would outweigh the like, we got a chance aspect of it.
Yeah, but they still definitely lean into that feeling because
Oh,
they do skip just 2 weeks, right? Like,
yes.
and so yeah, so the movie never
But
lets you really feel that downtime.
yeah, if you're not paying attention, then you would think that it takes place over the course of 3 days, which is not a dig on you. It's a dig on the fact that this film wants to have its cake and eat it too.
Yeah, yeah, and so like the movie never lets up, and so like it gets going and it never lets go, right? But that also means that you are never given the time to think about like where did this thing come from, right? Which is actually like kind of an important deal, right? And that like that becomes the hook for the idea of an evolution universe, right? It's what allows a TV show. It's what opens the door to possible sequels. Is the idea that they take care of this here for sure, but the fact that this thing even showed up is now like a huge thing in this universe that needs to be addressed. If we're ever going to go back to this universe, we need to address what the hell just happened, right?
Yeah, that's very true. You know what? I never get to finish my thought process with something. I'm gonna address it real quick. I forget that Dan Aykroyd is in this movie. I think that I invented every time. Every time I watch it, I'm like, Dan Aykroyd's in this movie. I'm like, no, he's not. Why would Dan Aykroyd be in this movie? And then he shows up, and I'm like, why is Dan Aykroyd in this movie?
It's another role of his that makes me think he's played the president multiple times, even though I think it's only been once in his career that we discovered, right? Because we always talk about Dan Aykroyd, and I'm like, doesn't he play the president in that one? You're like, no, he's like the executive of this building, and it's like, oh, that's right. This is another one where I remember him, and I'm like, is he the president? He's kind of the president in this one.
I mean, he's the president of Arizona. That's what governors are.
I'm gonna say this though, the bullshit lines of his talking to the military generals, like 5-star general, and being like, I'll have your badge if you don't get this resolved, is like the stupidest like nonsense. Because the second he's just like, if you don't figure this out, then I'll have your job, and I was just like, no you won't. This dude outranks any possible control that you would have over him. He is national, like
he's
army.
federal, you're state.
Yeah,
He's
exactly.
he's not a general in the National Guard of he's not registered in Arizona and only Arizona. This guy flew out from the Pentagon.
Yeah, it was, and the part of me was like, unless this is Texas. Like that was the only thing I could think, is like, unless this is the idea, is like it's interesting that they choose Arizona for this movie to take place, because in a weird way, if it were Texas, I'd understand it because of the amount of land that we're talking about and the amount of like space. Arizona is this like nice weird little choice because it's still a lot of big open empty space, right? But there's a sense of containment in Arizona when you say Arizona versus something like Texas. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like,
I also think it has to lean into the mining of it all. There wasn't a lot of this specific type of mining in cave systems in Texas.
Yeah, the idea of the cave systems for sure. Yeah.
I mean, you could quote me on that because geology isn't an exact science, but I feel like that's why we went to Arizona, because that's what they're known for in a really gross way.
There's definitely something to be said that in going back to the idea that this movie really leans heavily into actual factual like scientific beliefs, is the idea that places like Arizona all the way up here to Utah, like the idea that this is where we discover weird things like this because of the fact that there are underground systems for sure, and the idea that in Texas you would dig that deep and not hit oil, I think would be something for audiences to really not be able to wrap their head around, right? Like although like that gives you phenomenal like fodder for the final act of this movie when the army wants to burn everything down. Just say that there's an oil well beneath it that you're going to light on fire, and suddenly you don't have to have the napalm conversation.
I love the napalm conversation though. Like
Mm-hmm.
it's like napalm. Yeah, that's the thing that we still have, right? We have to still have it. You don't develop a weapon that was that deadly and then like shelve it indefinitely. Yeah. You shelve it in your armory for the day we might need it.
Yeah. So the final act of this film is the idea that they are going to just burn it all, and I totally like I think they actually earn that moment, right? Especially because of the way in which that idea is introduced. It is questioned and then the entire moment happens with the primates, and it basically justifies the governor turning around and being like, fucking burn it all, is like, yep, no, that's fair. That's a fair response to what just happened. But the realization, like, of what that's going to do, like the way in which that is introduced to us, like what the consequences of that are going to be, and like everything that is then done to stop it from then on out, like I feel like this movie loses the plot in the last like 20 minutes, 30 minutes of this movie. From the second that Orlando Jones flicks a cigarette,
It's
it is completely off the rails.
God, him smoking is so funny. Like Orlando Jones, if there was an award for best cigarette smoking in a film, he should win it every time. Because just the attitude that he affects because he's holding a cigarette, and the way that he does it, and then that flick of the match that like perfectly lands in the open petri dish, like,
and then sets off the entire.
and then sets off like,
thing, yeah.
oh my god, he is the catalyst, and it's like, well, yeah, like you're a biologist, like that never crossed your mind.
Yeah. Well, and another reason why it feels like this movie takes place over just a few days as opposed to a month is
Right.
because, like, the ways in which discoveries are made about basic science don't line up with the ways in which leaps are made in not so basic science in other moments. Like, so we learned from Orlando Jones' like match flick that it lands in the petri dish, sets this thing off, and realize fire actually feeds this thing essentially as opposed to kill it. So they're about to napalm this thing, and they're basically about to feed it. And then it becomes we have to go up against the giant monster, like third act, like Ivan Reitman thing. Like it's just like it's another moment that is so hard to divorce from the Ghostbusters story, because then we have this giant ass thing and they all have to get onto a utility truck, and they have to be these everyman utility characters going up against this like impossible threat. And that is the last third act of this movie, but it feels so pushed into what is the rest of this film that it really kind of doesn't work for me.
If this movie is Ghostbusters 2000, it isn't truly Ghostbusters 2000 until the third act.
Mm-hmm.
Like, even with like all the scenes that are semi-lifted from pre-existing Ghostbuster films up to that point feel like cute homage. But then at the end, it's like, we're just going to cast off any aspersions of this not trying to be a Ghostbusters film and really abandon all of the character development and plot development up to this point. Yeah. And it's disappointing. It honestly disappoints me that the film devolves into Stay Puft or Vigo. Like, yeah. It's disappointing.
Yeah, I don't like I don't know what the better ending is here. Like, I'm not going to try and like fix this film, but the choice that is made, and I think that's what it is really, is this is a movie of some strong choices. Every turn is a choice being made, and they stick to it. And so the choice is to basically just like throw out the rest of the movie just to get some really good third act like scenes of them fighting a giant alien, is a choice that gets made. And you know, in a lot of ways, like, is this movie satire? Because if it's a satire of like the alien film, like the alien invasion film, that's almost kind of like necessary, right? Because it is the third act attack on the giant alien ship, right? Like that scene has to be there. But how we get there and like the elements of it, I mean, part of it for me is like, no joke, the moment in which Orlando Jones gets sucked up into an alien anus and that bit keeps going is like that. Like, that's the kind of stuff where I'm just like, this didn't need to happen. Like, there's no value being added to this moment. But with like, it was just, it's such a bizarre, strong choice that also doesn't work for me. So like, I'm just sitting there just like, man, we were having fun, and you took it too far.
I suppose if I had to figure out where I would fix this film, because I'm not really interested in fixing this film either, but it would be nice if they thought they won. Mm-hmm. If like they kill the monkeys and they kill all the biological stuff in the hole where the meteorite is, and they think, all right, so the threat is contained, we're victorious, huzzah, right? If you have that moment, and then the reason that they're going to add the napalm to it is just to clear any evidence away, right? Like, we killed all the big stuff, but we want to make sure we kill anything that's left in this area.
Right.
And then that's what leads to it. It skips a step. It's building this beautiful story and narrative, and then it skips the false victory moment and trope just to go into that big giant monster climax.
Yeah, there's actually even a legit like big no-no of a line in which Julianne Moore goes, "Oh, he dropped the napalm early," and it is this sorry excuse for a MacGuffin. Like it's a plot like hole being patched with a Band-Aid in that moment. You're exactly right, because they are so close to exactly what you're talking about, where they get to go in and actually stop this thing before they drop the napalm. I mean, and then they get to come out victorious, and then the army goes, yeah, we're still going to napalm it. They do it, and then the thing shows up. That's a much better, cleaner like way to get to what happens. But instead what we get is they show up and they're about to do that, and then the army just decides to bomb things early. Like that's all. Like there's no deeper thing going on. It's just, the army just decides it's just gonna go a few minutes early. It's just like, oh shit, like yeah, it doesn't stick with you. There's no meat on those bones. Like
I mean,
yeah.
I know I talked about Power Rangers earlier, but like now that we've gotten to this point, like there's a reason why the Power Rangers think that they win in the plot line of every episode of Power Rangers. Mm-hmm. Like, you know that Rita is going to make her monster grow, but that idea that we did it, guys, like, that false victory is so important to a narrative. Like, it's a moment of hubris. It's a moment of, we obviously know what we're doing before we bring out the bigger guns.
Yeah, and it's a really effective tool in the alien invasion story too, of like this threat that we didn't have a hang on in the first 2/3 of this film. Now we've got a hang on it, and look how good we are at it. And then the realization that, oh, we're still not quite there, right? Like it's a really, really effective storytelling tool that is just absent in this film.
Yeah, and that's it. There's the big stumble of Evolution. And you're not wrong, because I think that the line of like, all right, so he's dumping the napalm at noon, so we have like half an hour, and then there's like, everybody's in position, we can go early, and it's like, those lines have never happened in the military ever. The military has never been like, let's start early. No. If anything, if noon is when you're supposed to drop the napalm, that's not going off till 3 if we're lucky.
And we're not talking about just like, let's have lunch early because everybody's here. Like this is straight up like, we are going to burn this area of this country to the ground. Like, you don't go early.
You don't go. Yeah, like if you tell people you have until noon to get out of here, you can't go early, right? What if somebody is still driving on the road trying to get out of town, thinking, oh, we got delayed, but we were told we're good till noon.
Yeah. It's such a weird like moment for this movie to again just make this strong choice of just, and then this happens and you're like, oh, did it really? Like, yeah, man.
I mean, you could even lean into that whole thing where they're down there and they're shooting selenium, and not in the fire truck yet. Just like, we're gonna try the selenium, so maybe they have like a super soaker full of it, right? And there's a toy too, right? Because then you can sell the squirt gun from Evolution, right? They don't think toyetically enough with the film, and that actually is disappointing when you get down the line to how they're going to make a cartoon and try to appeal to kids. Because there's nothing that appeals to kids in this movie. It's all adult. It's very much, I don't know. Like, we compare this movie to Ghostbusters. We've compared this movie to Ghostbusters pretty much the whole episode. Right? Mm-hmm. To the film's detriment on every level. But what we really should be comparing it to is Ghostbusters 2.
Yeah.
And we have to remind ourselves, as a society, as a nation, that Ghostbusters 2 is not that good a movie.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think you're right, right? And I think that the reason that it should be compared more to two than the first one is because it's a response to what happens with two. The idea that it is not as good a movie, and it is received in really awkward ways because there's a lot of like conversation about like you really kind of familyed this one up in a way, in a weird way. And like kind of the magic of the first one was that I could still bring my kids to it, but I wouldn't call it a family movie, right? And so like it loses kind of that sense in the second one. And I feel like he swings too hard back in the other direction with this one, right? Like he swings so far away from the idea of the family sci-fi adventure film and goes real heavy. And that is none more evident in like the really upsetting like violence in a lot of this film. Like the ways in which the creatures enact violence on human beings is actually kind of horrific. And I don't mean horrific in like unwatchable. I mean like it is basically a horror movie in certain moments of this. Like when that dude gets dragged into the lake on the golf course, like it's played for a laugh, especially Seann Williams Scott's reaction to finding out what happened. But like that is a scary scene, right? And I remember like the scene when the primate alien figures jump out. I mean, just come flying out from the hole in the ground, and they take that side character dude, that army dude that we've been kind of like not introduced to, but he has been in basically any scene that Ted Levine is in. This little squirrely dude is like right next to him, and I don't mean Tyrell.
His name is Carter. That's
Carter,
his last name. Yeah.
Yeah, like, and then we see him get like not even killed on screen, but then thrown down into the pit to God knows what happens down there, right? Like there is like some scary shit that happens.
Oh, he dies on impact. There's no way. Like the fact that Michael Bauer's character almost falls in the beginning, like that's death. You fall in that hole, you die. Right. Not just because of the organisms that are down there, because like it's freaking deep into ground.
Yeah. It's so as far as like leaning away from two and the ways in which two became very kid friendly, for lack of a better term, Ghostbusters 2, like this movie tries so hard to not be kid friendly in a lot of moments.
Yeah, I mean, even in the plot and narrative, if you're an adult who like, I liked Ghostbusters as a kid, I want to go see Evolution, and I'll bring my kids along, and maybe they'll like Ghostbusters the way I did when I was a kid, that goes right out the window in the first scene. Like, even, like, him going into a burning building to, like, practice for his fireman's exam, and then, by no account should Seann Williams Scott's character survive that meteor hitting.
Yeah,
like,
right.
Based on everything that we see about it, just the sheer destructive impact that it has. Like, I'm not kidding when I say compare him to the librarian. Like, yeah. That character in most science fiction is an unfortunate casualty of that incident.
Right. Yeah, but nope, he's our goofy hero. Which so like some of the choices and details in this film that just kind of are just weird. Like, he shouldn't be a firefighter, right? The fact that he is out there in the middle of the night practicing for his fireman's exam, he's committing arson, right? Even though it's out in the middle of the desert somewhere, it is arguably the worst place to start lighting random fires.
I mean,
with no protection around.
There are worse places than the desert to light a fire. Like the middle of a forest.
No, as somebody that lives in a desert, we straight up have days where like we can't, we have no burn days because you could literally burn the state to the ground
because of wind, and I understand.
And like a practicing firefighter would first of all be aware of that. Also, like he has there's no indication of like a fire extinguisher anywhere.
I wonder if it's a burn house. Like, I think if it's one of those things, because there are those weird, crazy training facilities where firefighters do train, and sure. I wonder if maybe, like, that's what this is meant to be.
At 2 o'clock in the morning, though?
No, at 2 o'clock in the morning, yes. What he's doing is wrong. I think we could all admit that what he is doing is wrong and dangerous. I don't think anybody's going to excuse those two parts of this. However, it always feels to me like when I look at that building, Like, that building is one of these things that was erected specifically to be burned down so that firefighters can test exactly what he is testing.
Yeah, but the fact that he does not go in full gear, the fact that he is,
He
the
doesn't even
ways in which
close
he
his
treats the
jacket.
moment, yeah, right. The ways in which he treats the moment are so out of it. Like there was never a moment where I feel like he would be a good firefighter, and I feel like that gets kind of lost in the rest of this movie, to the point where he is then given like like Cowardly Lion style is like given the badge of courage and told he gets to be a firefighter now because of like helping destroy the alien menace. And I was just like, don't do that. That's dangerous. Don't let him be a firefighter now just because of this.
Yeah, it does strike as, this is not fighting a fire. Fighting an alien is not fighting a fire.
Mm-hmm. Why not make him like an alien fight? Like make him a designated like alien fighter.
Like that's his job. Well, because it's set in Arizona, and the implication of being an alien wrangler or exterminator in the state of Arizona, I don't think we wanted to fuck with that in 2001.
Oh, man. Yeah. So this movie starts off with just a literal fucking bang. Like this whole moment, this whole scene is just like bizarre and weird. And it does kind of really mirror a lot of the opening to like Men in Black for me. Like when Jay and his original partner J and K pull over the
D. His name is D.
Is it D in the beginning?
D is the first one that K has to neuralize and then replace with J.
Yeah, but the ways in which like it is this removed, it's something about the idea of like aliens and Area 51 and being out in like the desert, right? Like and it leans into that immediately. And then it just every time it has the opportunity to make a strong choice, it takes it and it just fucking runs with it. I mean, them stealing the shotguns and that being how they defeat that alien in the first place, I was convinced they were going to kill that woman, and I've seen this movie before.
What I mean, the fact that woman is not hurt, she seems like fine, is crazy. And that scene right there, the scene with the oxygen tolerant dragon, which is another thing, is are dragons some sort of like early thought of the evolution aliens coming to our planet in some way, shape, or form? These are the things going through my head as I'm watching this film. That scene has big Scolari Brothers energy, like top to bottom, because this one Scolari brother pulls the prosecuting attorney across the courtroom, and that's the woman being carried. There is When It's Quiet, and I think it's Ray who's whistling to try to get them to come out. That's caw 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 tuki tuki. Like that's what that scene is. Yeah. And then when he walks up and he's like light, meat, or dark, that's two in the box ready to go. Yeah. Like there's no bigger mirroring of a scene from Ghostbusters than the scene in the shopping mall.
Yeah, and it just. Again, like the decision or the choice to have them just be able to take guns, load them up, and go out and go alien hunting in the middle of this mall in the middle of Arizona is like it in a movie that is trying so hard to drive the science. The reality of their world is just bizarre to me, right? Like it's that have their cake and eat it too that you were saying earlier, right? Like they want you to believe so hard that this is our world and that the science of our world is what's dictating what's going on in this film, but then they don't allow the real world to exist outside of that.
I don't know why the military is not present at the mall at all. Like that is like so crazy. The fact that there is a literal graveyard of these aliens and nobody notices that is insane to me. Like they have a pretty large military presence in Arizona at that time. Like that they wouldn't notice that in any way, shape, or form is odd.
Right, the choice to have a graveyard of dead aliens instead of just one, right? Like why not just have it just be one that crawled up out of the cave and have the exact same moment that you have? There's no need for it to be dozens of them dead, because then all it does is create, like you just said, this huge plot hole of like the military is here looking for aliens and they're failing.
why doesn't Wayne go to, and this is why I say that there's probably a longer version of this, or at least a different version of the script. When Wayne sees the mutant turtle thing in the pool filtration system, why isn't that when he goes to Harry and Ira, and then he's unable to have proof of it, right? Like it's gone for some whatever reason. And then that's why when he finds another one, he catches it and brings it to them to be like, no, I got it now.
Yeah, I mean, and his choice, again, the army's out there looking for aliens, and yet Wayne has this ability off screen, we never see it, to, with a group of friends, hunt down this thing that we just saw kill a man, bag it and bring it to them at the community college without there ever being a question of, did you did you sneak this away? Like, why wasn't the army there to look into this really weird incident that's happening in this town in which we know aliens are now taking over, right? Like there's no explanation as to why he's allowed to get away with that.
Yeah. Friggin' Seann Williams Scott and Jerry Trainer from iCarly are able to chase this thing. It doesn't try to attack them the way that it attacks the other guy, right? Mm-hmm. They just like run behind it until it chokes to death in our atmosphere.
Yeah.
Like, what? And nobody contacts? It's plot hole after plot hole after plot hole. And they wouldn't be as noticeable if there weren't so many.
Yeah, well, and so it kept bringing me back to this idea of, like, as much as we are talking about how comparative this movie is to Ghostbusters, it feels like that sort of stuff is shoehorned into this film, and it is exactly that. It is the shoehorning of those elements into this other story that creates all of these weird moments. It is this effort to introduce Seann Williams Scott as this Winston-esque character that introduces this whole other side of this story that doesn't make any sense because there's all this shit happening. Because with that comes the idea of what's going on in the town with the aliens taking over, and the idea that that people are getting injured, killed, attacked, and nobody's doing anything. That all goes away if you take Seann Williams Scott's character out of this story. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
it is specifically the attempt to make this a Ghostbusters-esque film that drives a lot of the issues with this film, and then it doesn't pay off because then everybody who sees it compares it to Ghostbusters and it doesn't hold up. So like it is this weird attempt to capture that magic, and it falls on its face and it fails, and that's why it's so like it just. I could not stop thinking this entire time. Like, this movie is the reason why I like Ghostbusters Answer the Call so much, is because I've seen Ivan Reitman try to do it again. And I've seen that it doesn't work that well a second or third time. Like, we know that. So all of these people out there who are just, like, hemming and hawing at the idea of anybody else touching that and doing anything with it that goes against their idea of that world is driven home in watching this movie how full of shit those people really are.
Yeah. In fact, it also speaks to a lot of my critiques, my own personal critiques about Answer the Call is, why don't you just do an original film that is similar in tone to Ghostbusters, but not call it Ghostbusters? And the reason is because we did, and society said no. So why not just call it what it is right on the tin and let people know to compare this to Ghostbusters from the start?
I mean, it's hard to emulate a thing, especially when you're only when that thing is the only really definitive thing in that genre, right? Like, there's not many films that like Ghostbusters. You can't really create a genre on one film alone, right? Like, so when a movie comes out and says we want to be like that film, like, that has to happen in order for a genre to really grow. But that means that second film really needs to step its game up, and Evolution falling on its face kind of really doesn't allow that genre to grow anymore. Like, there's a reason why we don't really go back to the Ghostbusters well for another 15 years, and when we do, it's in somebody else's hands with a huge like twist to the formula type style, right? And so, like, yeah, I could not help but watch this movie and think like, oh, right, this is why I really hate all of the conversation revolving around 2016's Answer the Call, because like as somebody that very much enjoys that movie, hearing everybody talk about how it pales in comparison and shouldn't have been made because it really should have been in the hands of Reitman, or at least Reitman's son, and all this stuff, and it's like, no, I don't think that would have helped either. Like I don't think you would have gotten the movie you wanted either way.
And we'll get to see and test that, you know, when Ghostbusters Afterlife eventually comes out.
Yeah,
Because
well, that's a whole other,
it's
yeah.
very difficult to ignore the fact that that film was supposed to come out summer of 2020 and then was delayed because of everything that went on with COVID-19, and now has been delayed again.
Yeah,
Because
yeah.
the summer
Conveniently,
movie,
they're just like,
yeah.
maybe we're not gonna push this one as much as we were. Yeah, man, I will be very curious to see what happens with that. But man, Evolution, like, there is stuff that I like. Like, I think that I think Duchovny's character is really interesting in that he has this past history with the military, and it's not a great one. It's not like he was some like hero that got like shuffled away because of a mistake somebody else made and he gets blamed for it or anything like that. Like, he does straight up screw up some dudes in the military. Another thing that is a little too like,
Oh my god, this film hits
too
so
advanced for my young
different.
brain to get.
This film hits so different in a post COVID-19 world.
Hmm.
Like the fact that what gets Ira Kane kicked out of the military is an experimental vaccine
Hmm.
that, like, oh, okay. Meanwhile, in the real world, we're doling out an experimental vaccine and seeing, you know, nothing as crazy as Kane madness, but certainly some unexpected, you know, it's not as protective as we thought it was, and now maybe two doses is not enough. Like, yeah, science needs to have time to evolve. It can't be done super quickly. And
Yeah.
that's a big, like, it's a weird thematic thing because by trying to move fast through scientific, you know, everything, that's why David Duchovny is now just the biology teacher at a community college in Arizona.
Right. Yeah. Like his sins of the past kind of become his like his saving grace going forward. And, you know, it's like hero lesson 101, right? Like turn your faults into your power type thing. And like and if that could have been explored even more, that'd be so much more interesting. But like we learn that he has an existing relationship with Ted Levine's character as the general, right? We learn that he has this past experience with military base guys to the point where one dude almost that dude pulls a gun on him.
Yeah,
Like,
you're responsible for the worst month of my life, Kane.
yeah, that was kind of upsetting. Like the idea that that dude was just yeah, and so the way in which like his character is part of this world is really interesting, and then it doesn't really go anywhere. I mean, like you said, especially in the last third of this film, like it just kind of gets thrown out that like he's not trying to prove himself in order to like get a job back. He's not trying to like it's not really made clear why it's so important to him that he and Harry
Harry, yeah.
get to claim this thing, right? Like I can I can surmise that the reason that he wants to do this is to like, you know, regain some notoriety as a scientist, but like he never really talks about that, right? He never talks about wanting to go back to where he was before.
Yeah, it almost seems pure, his intention with the whole thing.
Hmm.
Like, we discovered it, so we should be the ones who get the credit. Like, it doesn't ever extend, it doesn't seem to extend further than that. Like you said, you can surmise, because they talk about Nobel Prize, here we come. But the only one who really gets to talk about why they're involved in it is Harry, when he says, I figure with all this alien stuff, I can get an honorary doctorate somewhere. Which, that's a line that hits weird, because, like, I thought you were already a doctor. You refer to yourself as Dr. Harry Block,
Yeah.
and like, yeah, you're an adjunct professor at a community college, but I imagine you have your doctorate. So why does an honorary doctorate from some other institution open doors up for you?
Yeah, and like, and all of Kane's whole like pure intentions of like, we discovered it, we should get our name on it, we want to be like, we want to be known for this, that all disappears as soon as they realize that they have to destroy the whole thing, which again I'd be okay with if I knew his true intentions here. If he was really purely this guy that really felt like he could help people, and like it's what drove him to try and create an anthrax vaccine, and he goes too far too fast with it, and it gets a bunch of dudes sick, but it was legitimately from a place of he thought he had an answer. And part of this is that we didn't have a war to really lean on. Imagine this being made post 9/11, and the idea that he gets kicked out of the military for trying to create a vaccine for anthrax, after we now like all talk about like anthrax in the mail, and like that being like a, like, you know what I mean, like if that background had been applied to it, it'd be a different conversation. And so the idea that he wants to be there at the forefront of this discovery because it's a danger to the town, or like this is going to mean like this for people, like there's no overarching like characterization about why Ira is ever gives a shit about any of this stuff, right?
Yeah. And to the detriment of the film, like one conversation, like, because Harry talking about an honorary doctorate, it's almost throwaway dialogue, but it does put into perspective why he cares and why he is still invested and involved. Because there are some people, after they have an alien crawl inside of them, that would probably be it for them.
They'd be like, I'm done, I'm out, I don't want to do this alien thing. Yeah, he's not getting dragged along by Ira. Like, he's in every step of the way, and to to that same point, why do they team up with Wayne? Like, at some point Wayne's just in, and he's like, yeah, whatever you guys need, and he's just then part of the team.
Well, it's not even that he's part of the team, it's that he's present. He shows up with the amphibian remains.
The dog. Yeah.
Another dog, right?
Dog. Yeah.
The amphibian dog. And they're looking at it, and then like Harry's like, well, the least I can do is buy this guy breakfast. Which, dear God, do I miss going out to breakfast.
Oh my God! I just wanted to go. I want to go to a Denny's. That's all I want to do.
I'm watching that scene and I'm like, I didn't realize how much I missed this until you two were waving it in my face. You gonna eat that bacon? Yeah, I ordered it, didn't I? Like, like they're just buddies. They're just friends at that moment. And Duchovny's going to Allison to be like, look, we have one, and they're evolving and they're branching out. They're not just in your little hole anymore. And you people need to understand that, right? Which I guess sort of explains why the military isn't aware of the bigger presence, because they've been so focused on the point zero.
Like, but that's not a good excuse, because if you're the army and you're in a place because of a possible, that it is an alien like life that is down there.
Yeah.
Within just like 3 states around you, you hear anything, you send somebody to investigate. And the fact that there is not a single like man in black, that there is not a single like officer out there just showing up just to be like, hey, is this part of our thing? No? Okay, good. And then, like, you know what I mean? Like, that just doesn't add up.
They're like, we have it contained, so we don't need to patrol the surrounding area. We have it contained. And it's like, bullshit, you have it contained. You just built an elevator down there. That's all you did. Like,
you don't know what down there is. Yeah.
It's just, it's frustrating. But then he's with them when that happens, and Sarah Silverman has her scene in this film, which good for Sarah Silverman in this movie. I like all these people who are like, I'm going to be an Evolution because there's a chance it's going to be the next Ghostbusters, and I want to say I was there. Like, it really is just a moment. And then Wayne is the one who knows the radio codes that the police use. Yeah. So then they're like, all right, well, I guess we should go check out this call and see what it is, because apparently nobody else is. Right? Local Leos are being called to investigate this strange creature in the suburbs, which makes no sense at all. Like, why wouldn't the military be involved at that point?
Exactly. I feel like it comes down to the fact that I think I needed one more scene of Wayne trying to get in with them, because they meet him in the first scene, and then it really isn't until he shows up again with the thing from the golf course. Yeah. That really they get back together. Other than that, like we don't really see them interacting. So like I needed one more moment of him trying to get in with that group before they finally let him be in the group. But they basically just like meet this dude, and yeah, okay, great. He knows a couple of call signs from the cops, but like at that point, like why don't you say, all right, we'll pay for your breakfast and then we're gonna go check that out. That conversation doesn't happen. They just turn to him and he's like, are we doing this? And they're like, yeah, go team. And it's like, wait a minute, when did this happen?
Yeah.
When did this
like one of those, like even like that, a line of dialogue right there of like, all right, well we're gonna go. We'll pay for breakfast and we're gonna get out of here. And if he's like, but you were my ride.
Yeah. Yeah, there's just no questioning that he's just now one of them, and it's a weird, again, just a strong choice that this movie just makes and just goes with.
Yes. Oh. All right. So there's something we need to talk about in this film, and we've avoided it up to this point, and it's the treatment of women.
Yeah, man. I don't disagree. From the very beginning, in which we see Harry and the way that he treats his female student, to the ways in which Julianne Moore's character is. What is Julianne Moore's character? What is her character in this movie?
I don't know. First of all, so I made my little analog list against Ghostbusters. Even though I said I didn't want to do it, I ended up doing it. And Ira is Egon. And right there, that's why this movie should fucking succeed in every possible way. Yeah. Because Egon Spengler is such an interesting character. So to get to explore a film with him in the forefront is very exciting. And Duchovny nails the Egon Spengler character. Scenes where like, you were in military intelligence at the Pentagon? Yep. Thought you were just a school teacher. Nope.
Like he's aloof, he's witty, he's honest, like he's earnest in everything that he's doing. Like as much as I don't know what his motivations are, I think he knows what his motivations are. The movie's just not telling.
The movie's just like, no, you need to figure it out. You need to actually sit down in a room with Ira Kane and somehow get him to tell you. Good fucking luck.
Yeah, for sure. No, so he's definitely the Egon,
Yeah, he's Egon. And then Harry, I call him Venkman just because of how lascivious he is and like leering towards women. Yeah. And that's I'm fine with that. It's just weird to consider him Venkman, but then there's also that beautiful, impressive speech where he actually talks about science. And it's one of those moments where like, yeah, Dr. Venkman is a doctor. Like you can't discount that. It's just that he's more interested in women and a quick buck, where Harry's more interested in women and women's volleyball, which is not the same thing. They are two distinct things.
I will also say that in terms of him being the Venkman, he's also like, he's the one that drives the plot along. As much as Duchovny as the Egon style character is the like main focus of a lot of what happens in this movie, if it's not for Harry and his connection to this geologist society, if it's not to him wanting to be more like known for like the Nobel Prize stuff, like he pushes things forward a lot more than we see Duchovny do. You know what I mean? And I think that's very much a more Venkman like.
That is the Venkman goal of it.
Yeah, like that is the role for Venkman, is to be the true like protagonist in terms of like moving the story forward, as much as he might not be the focus like Murray is in Ghostbusters.
Right. And then Wayne is obviously Winston, because in this team of 3 doctors, he's the layman. He is just like utility guy, in over his head a little bit, but still capable and able to hold his own.
Right.
And then you get to Julianne Moore as Allison Reed, and she's Dana. And the problem with her being Dana is that Dana only exists as a prize to be won. And that's a very disappointing thing that I just said, but it's true. She is leered after and desired by almost every male character in the film. And that's what they do to Julianne Moore's character. And it becomes real disgusting and hard to watch in Evolution, because she is a main character and she's supposed to be a contributing force and voice to the plot. But at the end of the day, you still generalize her and break her down to just an object of attention, attraction, affection, and possession of every other male character on screen.
Yeah, what the movie really commits a really heinous sin in the very first moment that she is introduced, because we have the opportunity here for her as a scientist to be on the same level, if not above, because she's also a respected scientist of our main lead in Ira, right? The idea that she is not just with Dana in the Ghostbusters series, she is a single mother, a musician in New York trying to make her way, and like she's just trying to survive, and she gets kind of caught up in this world because of events, and she's a prop. She gets used as a plot device and throughout both of those movies, right? And here you really get the opportunity to not have that be the case because of the fact that she's not just a mom in the town. Like she is a studied character. Like she has knowledge to bring to the table to actually help in this situation. She's not just caught up in it. And the fact that she's then introduced immediately with this weird Rick Moranis twist to her, because she's also that character in this movie, is that she's also a ditz and a klutz. So like she'll just like trip over herself and just fall to the ground. And that is how she's introduced, not as this other fellow scientist, but as the klutzy comic relief to the team. And it's just like, it's not that like, and it's this weird thing where like I don't feel comfortable saying that like women can't be the comic relief in the movie. They definitely can, but you gotta pick and choose what you're doing here. If you're trying to move away from the idea of the problems that people really started again to call out with Ghostbusters at this point, where it was like, yeah, Ghostbusters is great, but it's really starting to show its age in the way that like certain people are treated in those films. It's like, yeah, okay, so let's do this. Let's push females more to the front in these stories. But to do that and then take all of her fucking authority out from under her, literally by having her just like fall on her face the first second she's introduced, is just upsetting. And like, it was a really weird choice to combine the weird like Rick Moranis style, like slightly kind of obsessed with the team, wanting them to succeed, even though there's a lot of stuff that they're doing that's questionable, to take that all of those elements and then add those into also the Dana character. It's just it's a mess.
You're overlooking just a moment in that scene that also does not gel with me at all. Like I don't understand the thought process behind it, and that's the fact that when she trips, we see her underwear and she's wearing a garter belt. Yeah. And the line, garter belt for a day event? Like, David Duchovny, I liked your character, but like you're just as guilty as what Harry has been doing to females up to this point.
Yes, the fact that there's an upskirt joke made, like it's not even just in filming, there's an upskirt shot, they then also bring attention to it, is just atrocious.
Yeah. And then, you know, when she meets Wayne and she lands in his lap and then he's like, hey, I'm Wayne Grain, we haven't met, and she's like, oh, I'm kinda with him, and I'm just like everybody. And then there's also the scene where Carter says to Ted Levine's Woodman character, you know, anger from a female, that generally means like, and he's like, shut up. And it's just like, this woman does not exist only as a sex symbol in this film. Like, she should have agency. You gave her a backstory of somebody who should have agency. Like, she's like assistant director of the CDC. Like, she is not just a member of the CDC. She's also high up in the inner workings.
Yeah.
Like, I don't get it.
That's what I mean, is like, you introduce this character, and in terms of who the character is supposed to be, this whole idea that she is high ranking and like above even what Ira would have been when he was in the army, like you had such potential there for such an interesting, like cool female character to be one of your other leads in this film. Why not just go full Dan Aykroyd with her? Make her super like nerdy but like good at what she does, you know? Because you look at Aykroyd in those movies, and he gets to be that important character. He gets to be that guy that knows what he's doing and comes up, but he still has flaws. He's the guy that thinks of the Stay Puft Marshmallow Man, right? He's the guy that falls into the goo. He's the guy that like he still gets those moments of like of hubris leads to embarrassment, but like without being nearly as offensive as Julianne Moore's character is throughout this entire film.
Yeah, she really is a pastiche of all three of those characters.
Mm-hmm.
And they really should have leaned into, she should have gotten to say, I mean, it's Julianne Moore too, right? Like, we definitely know who she is now in 2021 and what she's capable of, but even in 2001, she had a pretty impressive, you know, acting
Present.
slate. Yeah.
For sure, yeah.
Like so to have her come in, if she got to have half of the technobabble bullshit that Dan Aykroyd gets to do as Ray Stantz, it'd be fantastic.
Right.
And if she were just an equal, as opposed to, I've always been against like shoving a love story into a movie. And this is definitely like exhibit A as to why it's not necessary.
Yeah.
And then the whole scene where Orlando Jones and David Duchovny are down there and he's like, oh yeah, you go tap that, right? Give that little wax. And it's just like, this is gross. And then the whole, she's just an ice maiden. Like, what the hell? Like, I know you guys don't know you're on camera, but like, why is this what you're talking about while you're trying to make a scientific discovery? Like,
also, another huge choice in that moment to have David Duchovny's character like lay all this shit out about this person that he only met
just
once.
Like, I always think that they're the ones who have the history.
Yeah.
I never think
movie,
that it's Ted Levine.
Yeah, out of this movie, I always think like, oh, they knew each other, and she outranked him, and he's got a sore spot about it. But no, they're introduced to each other in that first scene, and that's really the only time that they know each other. And in fact, in that scene, she's rather like supportive of him compared to Ted Levine and Ty Burrell, who are just shitting all over of him. Like, she is still laying the law down because that's her job. But I think like that's maybe like one of the worst parts, right? Is the ways in which that she is treated as a bitch for just doing her job is like one of the most like anti-feminist slants you could ever do with a female character. Is like, oh yeah, yep, she's terrible for coming out as the head of the CDC in this position and saying you can't be here anymore. That makes her the worst person in the universe, doesn't it?
Yeah, I just it's hard to watch.
Mm-hmm.
And it's especially, and then also Harry with that female student, like, she has the best line of anything in the film though, where she's like, I don't want to be all girly, but I feel like there's something on my toes. Like, like it's like a nice thing where she's like, I'm not as stupid as this movie is trying to present me as.
Yeah.
Like, but I need to point out the fact, as the only one down here in open toe shoes, there's something down there.
Yeah. I mean, she also shouldn't have been down there in open-toed shoes.
No, she shouldn't have been down there in open-toe shoes, and the whole, like, does this fulfill my credit requirements? Like, ugh. But she gets to be Miss Arizona, and I'm happy for her. I'd like to see that, right?
Yeah.
If this movie came out now, there'd be a DVD extra of her path to Miss Arizona, and maybe she gets to kill an alien, and that's why she wins it. Because she shows that, like, capability on and off the runway.
Yeah. No, I there's not enough in this movie to let it stand on its own, I think, because the second you start looking at individual elements in this movie and not think about it in terms of Ghostbusters, then it just becomes kind of offensive in a lot of ways. Like there's so much going on in this movie that there's stuff that's really good that gets ignored because it gets compared to Ghostbusters, and then there's stuff that's really upsetting that we forgave because it was a child of Ghostbusters. So like this movie just it just doesn't work for me.
No, I mean I'm not gonna blame you for that. Like, there's a lot of the stuff that works for me is the intelligence in which this subject is broached. But at the end of the day, like, there's a reason I don't watch this movie yearly. There's a reason that this movie comes into my mind, I watch it, and for like 40% of the movie, I'm like, this is much better than I remembered. What's the problem? And then here comes the fucking problem.
Yeah, I mean, you know what it is it's a product of the 90s. You know, I big believer in like 2001 like meant that we were still getting kind of some runoff and some remnants of the 90s, and it's a very 90s film, you know, and it's really that tail end of the 90s. It's a perfect kind of time capsule of exactly everything that we kind of it's the kind of movies we would still be making if something like 9/11 didn't happen. It's the kind of movies that like if the 2008 like Enron collapse of our economy didn't happen, we'd still be making movies like this, because this is a movie made entirely on hubris. It is a movie about a bunch of dudes in a position that we've seen a bunch of dudes in before, and like they're just gonna succeed, and that's great. And we watch these guys succeed, and like it's feel good in that way, right? Like there's no moment in this movie where I think that the bad guys are gonna win. I don't think that the world is really gonna end ever, right? And that's and there's something to be said for those kinds of movies, right? Like there's a reason that like we enjoy that kind of late 80s early 90s sheen on films that we do so much, when like the heroes were heroes, white hats wore white hats. Like that is a product though of that time that just cannot exist going forward. And so I wonder how this movie would have done or been made if it had come out even a year later.
I don't think it would have happened. I honestly don't think that this movie would have happened, because it took 15 years for Ghostbusters Answer the Call to come.
Yeah.
I mean, because you could have done a Ghostbusters movie anytime in the 2000s,
Mm-hmm.
right? Evolution proves that people are still interested enough in that type of thing, but let's just give the people what they want.
Yeah, they just wanted Ghostbusters again, so
Yeah.
just give them the Ghostbusters.
And because of Evolution, I think that's why we see the 88 miles per hour Ghostbusters comic book series that tries to modernize it. I think it's why we finally see Ghostbusters to Hell and Back get adapted into a novel and released, and eventually the video game that comes out in 2009. Because Evolution proved that there's still a market for Ghostbusters, but people aren't ready for a movie like this yet.
People want more Ghostbusters. They're not interested in a genre that Ghostbusters gets to spearhead. Like that's really what this movie proves for me.
Yeah. All right. So there's one other thing that we need to address, because I wrote it in my notes twice, and this is going to be quick. Motherfucking DreamWorks.
Yeah, I know. When that first came up, I was like, did I put the wrong movie on? For some reason, I was under the impression this was like a Paramount feature, or even possibly Sony. Although I think it would have been too early for Sony, I think.
I mean, Sony definitely does a lot of the CGI, which is good in this film. As much as the practical stuff is great, I love that the monkeys have the exposed ribs as a sort of like armor system, completely explained by how these creatures have evolved. But the CG is very good for 2001.
Yeah, but it's the thing about CG that when you don't try to make it super realistic and super top of the line, if you just stick to just good stylized animation, then it'll look good forever. It's part of the reason why the stuff from Ghostbusters still looks good now, is that like with the technology at the time, it wasn't top of the line, but it was something that was very stylized and done well. So here we are, it's the Nintendo method of it doesn't have to look brand new, it just has to look good. And that's what this does. Is like it's very, very middle of the road CGI for what was being done at the time. But looking back at movies that really tried to push CGI at that time, you get really kind of you get some really offensive scenes of like terrible blue screen and green screen. You just don't see it anywhere in this movie.
Right. And I think DreamWorks being involved in this, Shrek is also 2001. So we knew what they were capable of, as long as they weren't trying to be top of the line, but just exist in a safe space. And I think that the way that Evolution turned out compared against how Shrek turned out is the reason why we hear DreamWorks now in 2021 and think animated kids film.
Yep.
And not, seminal Ghostbusters spiritual sequel.
One of those movies gets nominated for an Oscar, one does not.
That's very true.
Yeah.
And, who knows? Maybe we'll look into Shrek as well in one of these time capsules, because I'm kind of enjoying this glance back at 2001, as strange as it is in the latter half of that year.
Yeah.
But, yeah, I think I've covered everything I want to touch on. Is there anything else you'd like to add, Siege?
We didn't really talk about the Head and Shoulders jokes of this movie. Do you think that they paid money, or do you think that that was in the script and then they went to them and were like, "Can we use you?" Like,
I don't think that Head and Shoulders paid anything for this. I think they just gave them free advertising.
yeah,
I think
yeah.
that's
The bit in which he figures out that selenium might be their arsenic. I can't tell you if that's good science or not. It felt like bullshit.
I mean, you know what? It sounds like bullshit, but it's true. It's how the periodic table is formed. You do a
Right.
Knight's move from carbon and you get to arsenic. So like it's not good science, but it's scientific enough for the film Evolution.
Yeah, yeah, and I think that is a perfect example though of what this movie became. I don't know what it was when it was being made, when it was being written, when it was being conceptualized, but this movie became the movie in which we talked about arsenic being to carbon what selenium is to nitrogen, right?
Yeah.
Isn't nitrogen the
Yep.
yeah? And like the reason that arsenic is poisonous to us is not because we were made of carbon. I think that's the thing that really kind of throws me, is like there isn't. It's not because there's carbon in my DNA and my makeup that like arsenic makes me die. Like that's not how. It's not a reaction between the two, right? But they treat it like that's the case. And then the bold stance immediately within 5 minutes to be like, selenium, it's one of the main ingredients in Head and Shoulders, and we can get you a truck full of it, no questions asked.
Oh, 500 gallons? Yeah, we can do that.
What? And then like that's it. Like that's they can do it, and it's done. And like that is this movie in a nutshell. Is the weird ass science to get to that point, and then the problem of, well, how do we get that much, is instantly solved by a character just walking on screen and being like, I got that.
I also like that they're drinking Sam Adams, imported beer for Arizona. Yeah, but for all that we've said, I 100% believe that selenium being the solution was in the original script, if there was an original script before Reitman was involved. That just seems like the type of screenwriting 101 choice that you put into it. And then, like, maybe we think of something better. Maybe it's just, like, a clever little thing that we put in there. And, like, scientifically it doesn't work, but in the heat of the moment, L blocks from Tetris. That's how we defeat aliens.
Yeah. No, it's just it's a movie full of odd, bold choices that I don't think work, but, like, it's... People still...
It would be a shame if they weren't made. It doesn't work, but it's impressive, and it really speaks to humanity that this film happened.
Excellent.
I guess, and the one thing I'm going to point out is I like that the flying alien is killed by getting shot by David Duchovny's character, because he is established as the only character who would probably be able to shoot a shotgun as someone with prior military experience.
Yes.
Like, there's these small moments of like, we really put thought into this film, and they are overshadowed by literally everything else that the film does.
Yeah. Oh man.
All right. So, if you would like to talk to Seann about the film Evolution or any other films that you saw multiple times in the theaters, you can find him on Twitter at Siege vs. the World.
And if you want to send Devin any scientific like tidbits about this movie, because I'm interested to hear them, you can hit him at Devin D. Decker.
All right. So until next time, we're going to throw to Will to send away, and remember to thank our sponsor, Head and Shoulders. Will?
Thank you for listening to the Say Report with your host Devin Decker and Seaton Serwick. Please follow the guys on Twitter and Facebook by searching for The Say Report, and you can always subscribe on your podcast channel so this is delivered straight to you and you can enjoy it every week. With apologies to your mother, we'll see you next time.